Hey guys, Murph here. Welcome back to the next episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. This is episode 152, and we are now officially into the fourth year on the air. That's unbelievable. And as a little celebration of this milestone, I'm excited to tell you about a few changes coming to the show. Changes I hope and I think you'll like. If you didn't already know, Game of Crimes has a YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and type in Game of Crimes Podcast. All of our previous audio recordings are there. I think there may be a couple of short videos as well, but not too many. It hadn't been mentioned much on the show, and that's about to change. Starting with this episode, Game of Crimes will begin posting the videos of these weekly interviews on our YouTube channel. Now, that's not 100% because there are some people, I've got a guest that I'm interviewing tomorrow who works undercover and his identity cannot be revealed. So for those will be on audio only, but we're going to try and do everything on video now. So you'll get to see and hear the guest and, of course, yours truly, Murph, whether you want to see us or not. To some, this might not seem like a big deal, but for me, this is huge, okay? After you watch, did you hear that? After you watch your first episode, let me know what you think about the opening video. Pretty cool, huh? That's the official Game of Crimes throne, a throne made from items that you might see in law enforcement. My good friend Ollie Dale down in New Zealand, he produced that fantastic video for us, and a huge shout out to Ollie. Thank you, brother. Okay, before I go any further, let me say thank you to our faithful listeners and followers, and this includes Jules Franson and Gabe Silva in Boston. Now, one of my high school friends, a good friend of mine, Jerry Legier, we graduated together. We've reestablished contact after all these years. He was in Boston and he met two folks, Jules and Gabe, and they mentioned listening to Game of Crimes. So just because of that, I want to give a shout out. I just want to quickly recognize you. Game of Crimes would not be possible without your support. Regardless of who helped us get this thing going, it wouldn't be on the air without you. So I can't thank you enough. Just saying thank you doesn't seem adequate. And I know this, I don't take this lightly. But I want you to know that I truly appreciate you continuing to come back each week to support me and the show. Okay, let's get back to those changes I mentioned. If you recall, I've temporarily suspended the small town police blotter in the introduction. I'd received several comments about the intro being too long and thought this might be something that I could take out. Well, our favorite mafia queen, Miss Sandy Salvato, she started a poll on the Facebook Game of Crimes fan page. And I just checked that page to see what the current results are. I just checked that page to see what the current results are, and I'm happy to announce that Small Town Police Blotter will be back in upcoming episodes. Now, I thought about bringing it back on this episode, but I'd already had my notes lined out, and I haven't finished telling you about the couple more changes that are coming to the show, so I don't want to take up too much time. Most of you are aware that Game of Crimes also has a Patreon subscriber channel, and that's patreon.com/Game of Crimes. There you'll find monthly episodes of the Case of the Month, the Q&A section where you can ask me anything. You can't make this crap up, which is about the stupid criminals, what stupid criminals do. The Narcometer, where I review a law enforcement movie. 911, What's Your Emergency, where you'll hear a real 911 call and you try to figure out what happened. Current Topics, occasionally a surprise episode, and you never know what's going to come out of there. Lots of fun stuff with a few serious things thrown in. But I'm always looking for something new to throw in there that I think you might like. So I'm starting a new monthly Patreon episode called Pet Peeves. Now, you know what they are. We all have them. It's those things that most people might not consider a big deal, but to you, it makes you want to ram your brand new car into whoever or whatever ticked you off, doesn't it? I've got almost a full page of pet peeves just about the way people drive, especially around Orlando and Orange County. I don't know. You think I might need a little counseling? Maybe. Anyway, on Patreon and the Facebook Game of Crimes fan page, I asked for your input about some of your pet peeves, and I started receiving responses almost immediately. So thank you for that. But I want to tell you, you can send me more than one pet peeve, okay? Every single one of you that responded have only sent me one pet peeve. And I told you I've got a whole page full. So load me up with those pet peeves. We can all have a good laugh, and at the same time, we get to vent a little bit, right? Try to keep our sanity. Send me your pet peeves through either Patreon or you can email those to me at gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com. But here's another surprise for our Patreon subscribers, okay? Starting in the very near future, and I'm hoping next week, for those at the Guardian of the Realm and Warden of the Throne levels, that's our two highest levels, I'm going to start posting the raw, uncut, unedited version of our weekly guest interviews on Patreon a week before they're released anywhere else. These will be commercial free and will rarely, if ever, have the music, the intro, or or the debrief added. But because of your patronage and support, you'll be the first to see and hear each episode. The full edited audio and video versions will still be posted on Mondays and Tuesdays as usual, and they'll have the ads included. After all, the goal of the Murphy clan is not to have to eat cat food in retirement, and those ads, they help out with reaching that little goal. Okay. Before we get into this week's episodes, let's get the housekeeping out of the way. I'd appreciate you going to Apple or Spotify and hit those 5 stars each week. It only takes a few minutes, and this believe me, this little small act really supports the show. Send me your comments and feedback on Apple, Spotify, to our email address, which is gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com, or on the Facebook Game of Crimes fan page. Our website is gameofcrimespodcast.com. Here you'll find all our episodes, our book list, some merchandise, and Connie just added a few more items on there, and there's more to come. And there's a link for Patreon. Again, that's gameofcrimespodcast.com. On Facebook and Instagram, go to Game of Crimes Podcast, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, type in Game of Crimes. X still won't let me in, but I'm working on it. Okay, also on Facebook, go to Game of Crimes Fans and join the best private group on the Facebook platform. The group is run by the lady I just mentioned, our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato, the queen that rules with an iron fist, but she wears a velvet glove. You'll find lots of posts and comments there, and there's a place to just go have a little fun, okay? Come and check it out. We're getting close to, I think we're getting close to 900 members over there now. And for more content, come on over and join us on patreon.com/Game of Crimes. You just heard me talk about what you'll find there, along with a couple new additions. So come on over, sign up, and see what you think. And if you're already a subscriber, tell your friends about it. That's patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Now, this is for our weekly disclaimer. This is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things. We talk about bad people doing bad things to good people. I do take the stories seriously, but never hurts to have a little fun, does it? We try to have a little laugh here. So for today's episode, our guest is Vic Ferrari, a 20-year veteran of the New York City Police Department. I love this guy. Vic grew up in the Bronx and has a terrible accent. He doesn't sound American like me, does he? You know, and you'll hear me talk about my accent with Vic on there. He worked in several different sections in NYPD and has some great stories for us. Now, he doesn't hold back on anything, whether it's what goes on inside the department or what goes on outside the street. And let me warn you right now, you might want to grab a tissue before Vic starts. Some of his adventures may cause you to fall out of your seat laughing. I'm sitting here laughing just thinking about it. He's hilarious. Vic ain't bashful, though, I'm telling you. He tells it like it is or like it was. And it doesn't matter if you're a good guy or a bad guy. He's going to call you out. Now, after retiring, Vic moved to Florida with the rest of us crazy people. You're going to hear what he got involved with. None of it worked out. But then he got into memorializing his memories in a series of books. I read one of them, NYPD, Law and Disorder, and I loved it. A lot of his stories can fit into almost any police, fire, first responder departments, and even the military. I really think y'all are going to love today's episode. But before we can do any of that, you know what time it is. It's time to get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Here we go with the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. Glad you're back. You know, we have some of the best freaking guests anywhere on any of these true crime podcasts, and today is no different. And before we get into it, just give you a heads up, we're going to talk to a 20-year veteran of the New York City Police Department who's now retired and already has me laughing this morning. So this is going to be a really good interview. But before we get started, I got to give a shout out. I was introduced to today's guest by Patrick O'Donnell. And if you folks remember Pat, he was episode 77. We interviewed him on November 21st of 2022. He was the cop up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You know him as Sarge. He and I have stayed in contact. As you probably recall, Pat has his own podcast called Cops and Writers Podcast. You've heard me say it before. I'm saying it again. Go give him a listen. It's fantastic what he brings on, not just cops, but also cops and law enforcement people who are interested in writing books. So if that interests you, I know a lot of you folks are contacting me. I don't know jack about writing a book. We had a ghostwriter, just so you know. But Patrick is available. And if you think back, he also introduced us to John Norris, who was the California wildlife officer. That was episode 108 back in July 23. And we just had John on the recap from the Southern California Gang Conference on episode 149. And then he also introduced us to Rick Rybecki, who's retired Chicago PD. And I love that interview. That was episode 148, June of this year. So that was just a few weeks ago. But Rick actually knew my cousin, Bobby Cooper, who was made it up to Lieutenant Chicago PD before he retired. So give Patrick a listen, Cops and Writers Podcast. And Patrick, brother, thank you so much for continuing to support me. I'll do anything I can for you, brother. So who we got in here today? Well, we got a man who did 20 years with NYPD. His background is varied. We're going to find out why would somebody want to join NYPD? You know, I probably should have gone up there because with my accent, I know what I fit right in. They'd probably put me in the South Bronx because of my Southern accent, right? But today's guest is Vic Ferrari. Vic, welcome to the show, brother. I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on today's show.
Steve, thanks a lot. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, like my former co-host used to say, you might not say that at the end of the show. So we'll see how today goes. So just to get things started here, like we do with everybody, tell us just a little bit about your background, where you grew up, your family dynamics, schools, things like that. And I'm telling you right now, Vic, we're always looking for funny stories.
I've got my fair share. So I'm a Bronx kid, born and raised in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx. I grew up a stone's throw from the Cross Bronx Expressway, lower middle class family. From about the age of 5, I knew I wanted to become a New York City police detective. Growing up, watching The French Connection, The 7-Ups, cop movies, detective shows, I knew what I wanted to do. My parents wanted me to go to college or learn a trade. I would have none of it. I always tell the story when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my mother was taking me to the movie theater to see a movie on a Saturday. And around the corner from the movie theater was the local police station. And I was more interested in the police cars and the cops walking around out front of the station house, the way they leaned on their gun, the uniform, what was in the police car. So I knew the cast was dyed. I went to Catholic high school. I always say I did 5.5 years of a 4-year sentence between summer school and detention. I was always getting my ass kicked, but I needed it. Got out of high school. There was a gap of about 2 years before I was eligible to become a member of the New York City Police Department. So it was catch me if you can. My parents insisted I have a job, but nothing really sparked my interest. So I would leave the house unloading trucks at UPS and then come home with a job cleaning airplanes at LaGuardia Airport at night. I fudged my way into an application and became an exterminator with no experience. I was spraying and putting down poison for about a month. And one day the owner called me into his office and he said, I checked with Harry at Acme Exterminating Company. He's never heard of you. Who are you? And I was like, oh, now you're going to fire me? He goes, Vic, I can't have you going around spraying for cockroaches and putting poison down. You don't know what you're doing. I'm like, well, I just kind of watch the other guys. They don't look any smarter than me. So I always had a gift of gab, and that aided me immensely once I became a member of the NYPD. So by 20, I took the exam. By 21, I went through the police academy, and I had a wonderful 20-year career in the NYPD, and I worked on a lot of different units. I was a rookie cop in the South Bronx. I worked in the 4-2 precinct, where they filmed the movie Fort Apache, the Bronx, several years earlier. I worked in a DUI unit, which I absolutely despised. I worked in a couple of different plainclothes units, pickpockets, robberies in progress. It's called an anti-crime unit in the precinct. I worked for a year and a half in Manhattan North Narcotics Division in the early 90s. And then my last 10 years with the NYPD, I was a detective in the auto crime division. So anything with chop shops, stolen cars, changing VIN numbers, exporting stolen vehicles out of the country, that's what I did. I retired from the NYPD. I moved down to sunny Florida. I got my certification. I became a police officer down here for a cup of coffee. I absolutely hated it. I went from being a detective investigating organized crime in America's largest police department to being on an episode of Reno 911. I says, I'm not going to do this. So I re-retired and I got into writing, and I've written a series of behind the scenes NYPD books. And last year I started an NYPD themed podcast called NYPD Through the Looking Glass.
So in about 3 minutes there, we just covered his whole life. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
You asked, I told.
Well, and we're going to back up a little bit, but I got to ask you, when you were at Reno 911, did you wear them little shorty shorts?
I did not. Pants? I was not Jay Dangle. Whoever wrote, let me tell you something. They definitely had inside information because they cover a lot of the personalities working in an NYPD precinct. Although it's supposed to be a sheriff's department out in Utah, they definitely have the medicated female, the cop with the aviator glasses, who's a tough guy that does absolutely nothing. They've got the personality types covered.
Oh, it's hilarious. You were talking about wanting to be a cop since you were a kid, and I was reading. I just recently, actually yesterday, finished reading NYPD Law and Disorder, which was your book that came out in 2021. And at the end, you talk about wanting to be a police officer. You talked about what you said, watching the cops at a very young age, how they'd rest their hand on their gun and so forth. And you said if you went in the post office and stole the wanted posters, if you had a gun and handcuffs, you'd have been out kicking ass and taking names.
Oh yeah, my friends and I, and the ironic thing is a lot of those guys became cops. We were little boys. We would sneak into the post office like probably 10, 11 years old, and we would steal the FBI wanted posters off the wall. You'd have to jump up on the counter and give it a tug. One time the clipboard almost hit me in the head, and we'd go around the neighborhood. You know, Billy Ray Johnson wanted for a bank robbery in Arkansas or interstate flight to avoid a lawful prosecution, and we're walking into the local deli, and there's some poor Con Ed merc, and we're like, you know, so that's what we used to do as kids.
Well, what was the attraction to the police department? Did you have family on the job?
Fun running around. Listen, I grew up before the computer age, so we were in parking lots and back lots playing cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers. And, you know, the light went on. You know, I could get paid for doing this, and this could be a lot of fun.
Did anybody else in your family, were they on the job?
No, my younger brother, who I refer to in my books as Fredo Corleone Ferrari, that's not his name, but Fredo followed me into the NYPD a couple of years after I joined.
Oh, yeah? So what did, I saw that you grew up with an Irish father and an Italian mother. That's a nice mix.
Yeah, it was considered a mixed marriage in the 60s. I'm a hybrid. The funny thing about my neighborhood was it was predominantly Irish and Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the neighborhood was Catholic and Irish and Italian. And then luckily for me, I could survive in both worlds because it was definitely a clannish neighborhood where the Italian kids tend to hang together and the Irish kids. And I knew both worlds. My grandparents were off the boat from both countries. So I was just as comfortable in one house as another. So I go into an Italian household and everything's covered in plastic and there's runners on the carpet and don't go in that room. That's for people. And there's always a relative that can't get out of his own way that lives in the basement apartment. And then the Irish, they always had the little signs and the little ditty things and they spoke in rhymes. And if I'd stay over on a weekend, you'd have the Irish breakfast with the blood pudding and sausage. So I knew how both worlds worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I bet you had some good meals there. Was your mom a good Italian cook?
Oh yeah, definitely. I learned all my cooking from my mother.
Well, you know, and I'm Irish English, and I guess the Italian thing helped you keep your hair because mine left a long time ago.
Yeah, we always say everybody in my family gets waked with a full head of hair.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I got to tell you. Well, I think some of this disappeared too because I have 4 kids and 2 of them were girls. When the girls came along, pops went bald. So you mentioned a brother. Is that the only sibling you have?
Yeah, I got a younger brother, 2 years younger than me.
Is he still on the job?
No, he was a Marine, or is a Marine, and then he worked in Department of Corrections on Rikers Island for a couple of years, and then he rolled over to the NYPD. I think he did 5 years in corrections, 15 with the NYPD. My brother's got an interesting past because he was on Rikers, worked in what's called the All-Star Unit. So all the high-profile inmates that are awaiting trial go there. So he had Larry Davis, who shot a bunch of cops. He had the Angel of Death, Greg Scarpa, who was in there. He had that guy, I think his name is Daniel Rankowitz, the guy that killed his girlfriend and then dismembered her and cooked her up and served her at a soup kitchen. So, my brother had all the winners.
Man, I'll be honest with you. I was a cop for 38 years. I can't imagine working in corrections. That
Oh,
would
I
just,
know.
I
It's
couldn't
the
do it.
easiest thing in the world when you got a pain in the ass prisoner and you hand them off to corrections, and it's like you get to go
Yeah.
home. They're out of your hair. They're not. I don't. They're not going through withdrawal anymore. I got to use the bathroom. It's you're done. But then
Yep.
corrections has to deal. It's a totally different mindset.
Yep. What was the opinion of your mom and dad when you said, "Hey, I'm going to NYPD"?
Be careful. I mean, they weren't against it. They were just happy I had a job. I think my mom was of the opinion what I don't know can't hurt me, so she didn't really ask a lot of questions. My father was a cop buff and wanted to know everything. And a lot of
Yeah.
times I couldn't tell him anything, especially if we're working on an organized crime case or something. And sometimes some of these cases, some of our clients lived in the neighborhood. So I really, I didn't tell my dad. And then like he read something in the paper and go, "Were you involved in this?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why didn't I know?" I'm like, "Dad, I'll tell you now."
Yeah. He wants to be in the know. Oh man. So when you were in high school, did you play any sports?
Yeah, I ran. My high school didn't have a football team, which I would have loved to have played football. We had I ran track, but I tried out. I thought I was, in my neighborhood, I was a pretty good baseball player. And then you find out once the competition starts increasing with kids all over the city, I realized I couldn't hit a curve and I wasn't as fast as I thought I was. So it was
Yeah.
track.
Now, you said I think your parents or your mom wanted you to go to college, and you weren't going to have any of that. How come?
Just didn't have the interest. And my parents, I mean, they didn't go to college. My dad was a butcher. My mother was a housewife. So they didn't really know the deal behind the SATs and Pell Grants and all that stuff. And my brother and I certainly weren't going to educate them in it.
Mhm.
I just never appealed to me.
Yeah, and it's not made out for everybody. I've got two that did go to college and two that didn't go to college, but to each his own, really. Did you get married anywhere along the line here?
No, I stayed single. That's why I was able to retire after 20 years.
You still single?
No, I have a girlfriend, but no, no, not married. No,
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
none.
Are you sure?
No, I'm positive. Oh, trust me. Again, that's why I was able to retire so young.
What about that wolfhound you have? Do you still have it?
This will be my third one. This is Chelsea 3.0.
Yeah.
I had two boys previous. The female is by far the most difficult to train, but just as lovable. I've always had a love for Irish wolfhounds, and
Yeah.
this will probably be at my age. This will probably be my last puppy. I might get a rescue down the road, but yeah, I just love that breed.
They're big dogs. That's a lot of dog food. That's a lot of money right there, just keeping that thing fed.
A lot of plastic bags to to pick up after them too. They leave pyramids wherever they go.
Oh, geez. Now, so how old were you when you applied to NYPD, and then how old were you when you got hired?
The way it worked back then is it was a civil service exam to join the NYPD, and there was this trade newspaper called The Chief, and the chief would post when city civil service jobs were available. There was an exam coming, and you would file based on that newspaper. It wasn't like the internet now; you can go online and fill out an application. So what I would do is, whenever that chief came out, I forget if it was once a month or once a week, I would always go up to the newsstand and grab it. Sanitation, nope. Health inspector, nope. Exterminator, nope. NYPD,
Yeah.
here we go. So you would fill out an application. You would go to this, I forget how it worked, but you'd get an application. I probably started the process by 18, 19 years old as soon as I was eligible.
Mm-hmm. And then how old were you when you finally got hired?
21.
And that was, did you say 87?
Yeah, 1987.
That's the same year I joined DEA. I'd been a cop for 12 years before that. I'm an old fart. I'm a little bit older than you are. I know you couldn't tell that, but just wanted to straighten that out in case there was any question. When you went in the academy, so how many cops are there in NYPD?
I don't know now, but at any given time, it's usually between 30 and 45,000.
Holy cow. That's like 4 times the city that I grew up in, and little town I grew up in. Just in cops. Holy cow.
It's all connected too. I'll tell you. I mean, everybody, if you don't know somebody, it's very easy to find out who someone is.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, because it was families and friends and relationships that went back decades. Like we were talking about my Catholic high school. My Catholic high school produced cops the way Penn State used to produce linebackers for the NFL. So I went to an all-boys school. My graduating class of 250 boys, 40 from my graduating year became NYPD cops, and the year before that, and the year after that. So everybody
Wow.
knew each other through high school or marriage or cousins or playing Catholic high school sports. You'd run
Holy
into
cow.
guys like, hey, and it would be so easy to find out about somebody.
Yeah. So
What's this guy's
now,
story if someone just showed up in the station house one day, got transferred, and what happened? Oh, no, I wanted to change the scene. You get on the phone and you call somebody that's pre to go, what's this guy's story? Like, oh, yeah, that's why he's in your pre. Oh, all right. Well, stay away from that guy. You know, he's got issues.
just the same way in the feds, the DEA, when you transfer to a new office, everybody knew about you before you got there.
We always say the phone call comes about an hour before you get there.
Yeah. It's like that everywhere, I think. Everybody's checking you out. They're, like for us, they want to know you're a snitch or not. So I'm pretty sure that's the way it is in all law
Yeah.
enforcement.
Is he a tattletale, right?
Yeah. So were you 19 when you got hired?
No, I was 21.
21. And your academy, I think, is that 6 months?
Well, I don't know what it is now, but yeah, now back then it was 6 months.
And did you spend the night or you went home?
No, it was no, you went. It was every day. It was a week of 4 to 12s, then a week of days. No, you went home. It was 8 hours a day. You didn't stay there or anything. It wasn't particularly challenging. I mean, I was in good shape when I went into the. I mean, I was 21, stocking shelves at a supermarket. It wasn't like I was a Navy SEAL, but I didn't find the physical aspect challenging at all. I wasn't much of a student in Catholic high school, and I quickly realized if I want to get through this, I've got to change my mindset, learn this material, and pass these tests. But it wasn't particularly difficult.
How many people were in your academy class?
I think I was in a mid-sized class of about 1,200. Well, they range anywhere from 250 to 2,500 cops
at one time.
At one time.
I mean, that's like a college. That's a university campus, right?
Yeah, it's a big litter.
Holy cow! And then don't they break you guys down into smaller groups?
Well, you're in I don't know. Again, I don't know how it is now, but back then you're broken up into companies, and each company is back in my time was like 30.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking this is we've had some other NYPD guys on here, and as old as I am, I can still remember a few things. So now there's always funny stories that go on in the academy. Like in the DA, my first academy was West Virginia State Police Academy, and I was young and stupid, and I had to do a lot of fire watch duty because we spent the night at the academy. But in DEA, when you screwed up, they called it writing a memo. You had to explain in writing why you did something goofy. So tell us some goofy things that happened while you were going through the academy, whether it was you or some of your classmates.
Well, the NYPD is a paramilitary organization. It's not like getting off the bus at Paris Island with the drill instructors, but it's close. They're breaking your balls. They can't break your balls as much as is in basic training, but they're all over you. You have to dress a certain way, and in your top pocket you had these 2 orange cards. They were called star cards. And if you didn't do your homework or you didn't square the block right or whatever infraction, they would pull a star card and it would go up to room 610, I think it was. And if you got more than 2 star cards, then, it's like they put you on a program or a plan. They're already trying to get you out the door. I don't know how it is now, but back then they didn't screw around. They really were on your ass. There was a guy in my police academy class. He's in my book. He shows up in a couple of my books. Wall Street guy, came on the job later in life. He was in his late 20s, where the majority of us were in our early 20s. And, he was a lot smarter than us. He had a genius IQ. He would show up hungover, sit in the front of the classroom, half asleep, and retain everything and not even have to study and pass it. Like, we were in awe of this guy. Yeah. And, he was kind of like the Wolf of Wall Street. He was during that time period. So he had a totally different mindset of us. And he didn't last long. I mean, he got out of the police academy, and then he left the NYPD, and then he found his way to Florida, which shows up in my books. But he was involved in so many things. He threw a party after we graduated from the police academy, and his Wall Street buddies are there, and they're all coked up. And I'm like, what the hell is this? They weren't doing it in front of us, but they're all coked up. They're all handing us their business cards and stuff. And he's got strippers in his apartment. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I'm living in my parents' house. I'm making $25,000. I had to borrow money off my parents for my police equipment. This guy made a killing in Wall Street. And for whatever reason, he wants to be a cop. He passes out drunk, and his friends shave one eyebrow off. So a couple of days later, he calls me up, and he's cursing at me. And I'm like, I didn't do it. He goes, why didn't you stop him? I'm like, it's not my job to stop them. And I go, when did you realize that you had one eyebrow? He goes, the next day I had to catch a flight. He was going somewhere, and he says, you know how small the bathrooms are on a plane, that your face is almost against the mirror? I go, yeah. He goes, that's what I noticed. He goes, people were staring at me. He goes, I didn't know what was wrong with me. He was going around with one eyebrow for the whole day.
Now that sounds like something cops would do to cops.
Yeah, but those guys, I'm sure those guys are all in jail or on an episode of American Greed.
Yeah.
And they were sketchy, to say the least. But yeah, he didn't last long.
Did he? Oh, he didn't last long on the PD.
No, I think it was one of those things. It was a mutual parting. I think he just got off probation, but there was enough things about him that they were like, maybe you should go.
Yeah, yeah. So, so now you get to the station, and you mentioned the equipment you had to buy. What did you have to buy? The city doesn't supply your equipment.
$1,200 is a lot of money now.
Mm-hmm.
$1,200 was a lot of money in 1987. So probably about the second day of the academy, they pull us all out and they put us on a school bus, and they take us to the police equipment section, which is in the bowels of one police plaza. And the NYPD stop. So who runs the police equipment section? Well, it's civilian employees that are miserable, and it's cops that are on modified assignment, which means you screwed up and the NYPD doesn't quite know what to do with you yet. So they're going to put you in a crappy place with crappy hours, with crappy people, until they decide they're going to punish you and take vacation days or show you the door. That's who's in the police equipment section. So it's all these miserable old timers. There's 30 of us, and they hand you a shopping bag, and it's a couple of pairs of pants, it's uniform shirts, it's your patrol guide, your handcuffs. I mean, anything a cop would wear. And you're standing there, and the bag is getting heavier and heavier, and you're going station to station to station. My bag ripped, and I'm holding it like I wish I would have brought like a plastic bag like a homeless person.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring that home, and I had to borrow money off my parents. And then the gun, that's the funny thing. So then one day you come into the police academy, and there's a couple of guys from the range sitting around a table with, if memory serves me correctly, we had a choice of 3 guns. I think it was a Colt, a Smith & Wesson, and a Ruger. And they gave you like 30 seconds to handle an unloaded gun, to make a decision to pick this thing that's supposed to protect you for the rest of your life. And, and it's like, draw and present. And like, huh? Like, I had no familiarity around firearms before I was a cop. I mean, I held that cap gun. I never held a real firearm in my life. And they're screaming at guys, don't point that. It's like, nobody knows anything. I mean, the guns were unloaded, but yeah, they gave you about 30 seconds to make a decision. I went with a Smith & Wesson. And then a couple of months later, they take you out to Rodman's Neck out in the range, which that's another story where the NYPD does its firearms qualification. So it's in this parcel of land on a swamp. And on one side, you have City Island. On the other side, you have a toxic waste dump that's been closed for decades, that the mob was dumping stuff in there. Mm-hmm. And people are dying of cancer all the time. There's so much lead in the water. Since you're surrounded by a swamp, depending on the time of day you go, you're being attacked by mosquitoes. Mm-hmm. So try doing your qualification course, and it's like,
yep.
And then we're shooting at metal stanchions. So occasionally a bullet will ricochet off a stanchion and hit somebody.
Mm-hmm. Oops.
Yeah. Oops.
The equipment that you got there, you had to pay $1,200 for?
Yeah. I had to borrow $1,200 off my parents.
Wow. I mean, I know they got a buttload of people there, but geez, you'd think they'd at least, like the small town I worked in, we only had 35 officers. They provided you uniform. You had to probably provide your own weapon and your own leather gear, but everything else they provided. What about if you wanted something extra, like a shield?
Or anything? No. You don't get an extra shield. That's a funny story. So when you get hired, as a cop, you get a police shield. Okay. Or if you get promoted, you turn that in. You get a sergeant shield. A sergeant turns that in. Okay. So the NYPD, they don't want you having duplicates. Do guys do it? Yeah, all the time. Because if you lose a duplicate, no big deal. You lose the real one, you're screwed. So when you get promoted, right? So when I got promoted to so the NYPD promotes in bulk. So the day I got promoted to detective, and this is a funny story. You get told to go down to One Police Plaza at 7:00 in the morning, but the promotion is going to be at 10. But they want you down there in your dress uniform at 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
You get down there, and there's a guy from the police equipment section, not police equipment, from the NYPD ceremonial unit. The guy was a sergeant there, a lieutenant there. I think he was a captain there. I'm not going to mention his name. He looked like Dudley Do-Right. And he goes down the line. It's like getting picked apart by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. You need a new belt. Pulls you off the line. You need new shoes. And they make you go to the equipment section and buy this stuff for your promotion.
Oh.
Your gloves aren't white enough. So they hit you that way. So you got to buy new stuff before they won't let you get promoted, right? Then you go on another line. And I mean, I'm not making this up. There's a leaf table. And behind the leaf table are cardboard boxes and the civilian employees. So you walk up. What's your name? Ferrari. What's your tax number? Shield. You give them your NYPD shield, and they have molds. And they take your shield and they put it in a mold. If that shield doesn't fit in that mold, they pull you off the line. You get modified on the spot or suspended, and you're not getting promoted. And there was a guy 2 people over from me brought his dupe as opposed to his real one. Ooh. So when he went in there, they put the dupe in and it wouldn't fit. Pull him off the line, you get suspended and you don't get promoted. So anyway, so mine fit. The civilian employee takes my police shield, puts it in the mold, goes, okay, and throws it over his shoulder. I'm not making this up, into a cardboard box with like a million other shields.
Oh.
Okay, here's your shield. Here's your new shield. Here's your detective shield. So you hand it, go off the line. You pin it on. And then later on, they call you to the stage. You shake the police commissioner's hand. Everybody applauds, and you're a detective or a sergeant or whatever.
Where did you guys get your duplicate shields at?
Police equipment stores.
Gotcha. That's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. Those dupes, they do not want you going around with dupes.
Well, I mean, having to go and pay for your own equipment and everything, is somebody getting a kickback there? Hey, you need a new pair of shoes. You got to pay for them. You need a new pair of gloves. You need a new belt.
It's cheaper. Let me put it to you this way. It's cheaper to buy your equipment at the police equipment section, but it's a pain in the ass because there's no parking around One Police Plaza. So you got to find a parking spot. Then they're always closed or out to lunch. Mm-hmm. And then by the time you get in there, you got to deal with some guy that's, not pleasant. It's just a pain in the ass. So every borough has these privately owned police equipment sections, and they sell jackets, shirts. I mean, you got to show your police ID to buy some of these items. And the markup is crazy, but it's the convenience of not having to go down to One Police Plaza. If you're a precinct cop and you have to stay in that precinct all the time, you're going to go to a police equipment section. If you worked in organized crime and you have the run of the city, yeah, let's go down. I got to go get photos, and let's go down. I got to hit the equipment section.
Jeez. Oh, it just sounds like there's maybe I'm too suspicious. Sounds like somebody's getting a kickback somewhere.
They're making money, but I do know it's a pain in the ass when you get promoted because you think you got your uniform squared away, get a haircut, and they just start pulling people off the line. It's supposed to be a great day. And then my father, all he did was complain about the parking. Is there parking there? Dad, I don't know. You got to find it. They don't have special parking for us. And I was like, Dad, he goes, if I get a ticket, I'm going to tell the police commissioner. I'm like, Dad.
Okay.
So if you're getting promoted, my career's supposed to be going up, not down. I don't want to find myself in Brooklyn somewhere.
Oh, that's hilarious. So, okay. So you report to your first assignment. Now back then, did you go out on foot patrol?
Well, back then you would get assigned. So after the police academy class, they send rookie cops to different boroughs, and each borough had a field training unit. So 50 guys. So in the Bronx, there were 3 separate field training units.
Mm-hmm.
And in my time, 50 cops went to each field training unit or zone. So there was zone 7, 8, and 9. I went to zone 7. So my zone covered 3 or 4 precincts. So what they would do is you would be assigned several sergeants, field training sergeants, and they would have orientation with you. And then what they would do is they would sprinkle us on foot posts across the South Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to figure it out. It really was baptism by fire. I always tell the story of my first foot post. I'm on Fulton Avenue. It's abandoned buildings everywhere. It's the dead of winter, so this huge pool, the city pool, is closed. and I'm watching crackheads walk by with furniture they stole, and people are coming up to me asking me questions in Spanish. I'm like, what did I just get I mean, I grew up in the Bronx. I thought I had this. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And then if you have an issue or a problem, you get on the radio, you call for your field training sergeant, but then you quickly realize you can't call this guy for everything. He's going to get pissed off. So you really had to call this guy when you were in over your head. And if you didn't have a foot post a couple of times a month, the field training sergeant would grab you and another rookie, put you in a patrol car, and then you guys would answer calls with the field training sergeant. But you would think that would be great, but it wasn't, because the field training sergeant wants you to learn. So they're picking up a job imaginable, missing 5-year-olds, DOAs, guarding a crime scene. You know, I remember one of my first DOAs was a guy that was murdered, but the squad actually figured it out while I was there. This guy was working on his car, sitting on the curb. He got into an argument with his neighbor. His neighbor took the car door and slammed his head in it a couple of times. The guy went upstairs into his apartment and grabbed a gun. He was going to come back downstairs and kill the guy, and dropped dead on top. He had an aneurysm, and he fell over the coffee table. So, you know, a couple of days later, there's a smell coming from the apartment. The detectives get there. They find the gun, like, dropped by his hand, and this guy slumped over the coffee table. It's obvious he had the gun in his hand, and he died from blunt force trauma, but he wasn't shot. And it was interesting watching the detectives going back and forth in and out of the apartment while I'm just standing there with my thumb up my ass trying to figure out, you know, open the windows because it smelled so bad. And how does this work?
Yeah. Did you learn to carry a cigar or Vicks Vapor Rub or anything?
No, you want to know the trick I learned from an old timer was, after you figure out that it's not a suspicious death or a homicide, you rummage through the kitchen for coffee, and you pour coffee grinds in a pot, and you burn the pot, and the smell of coffee grinds will permeate the apartment. It's a lot more pleasant than Vicks.
Yeah, but that'll override the smell of the corpse.
Yeah, the DOA.
Whew. Wow. Now, I read in your book, is it a true story where you were walking a beat, and I think you had a domestic you had to answer to, where you talked to a lady and she was wanting to kick her boyfriend out, and you never saw him, but then another rookie comes by. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Talks me into calling internal affairs on myself. Oh, yeah, that's in my chapter, Embarrassing. So I'm a rookie cop. So when you're in the police academy, all they talk to you about is police corruption. From the moment you're hired, they tell you you're going to get fired. They have prosecutors that are tasked with prosecuting police corruption come in and give these, like, sermons. They bring in cops that were fired or went to jail. I mean, they really scare the shit out of you that if you see corruption, you got to call the Internal Affairs Division. I got this foot post over in Little Italy in the Bronx. This woman flags me down. I go into her apartment. They were using like a cardboard box as a coffee table. She hates her boyfriend. She wants him out. And I'm asking her all the questions. Did he put his hands on you? No. Was he threatening you? No. He doesn't pay his bills. So I said, I can't throw him out. He's been here more than 30 days. He's getting mail here. You got to take him to landlord tenant court, or so you got to take him to civil court, whatever it was I knew back then. And I left. Thought nothing of it. And then this Mama Luke, this other cop, runs into her boyfriend. The boyfriend must have come back. She told him she called the police. He told her, I bribed that cop. He's never coming back. I never met this guy. She runs into the other cop, this other rookie cop, and tells him, my boyfriend paid your partner or this rookie cop or this other cop not to arrest my boyfriend. So he comes up to me and he goes, we got to call internal affairs. He talks me into it. Shows you how smart I am. So I pick up a payphone, I call the IAB action desk, and they think it's a prank, and they hang up on me. And I call internal affairs again. And I'm writing down their names in the book in case this comes back to haunt me. And the guy's like, let me get this straight. You're calling internal affairs on yourself. I said, yeah, that's a first. He goes, stand by. And he hangs up. Stand by. I'm thinking of that movie. What was that? 3 Days of the Condor. I'm waiting for, what the hell was that guy's name to come pick me up for that day? You know, and I'm like, what's going to happen next? About 20 minutes later, this black 4-door car rolls up with this overweight NYPD Irish-based captain. Rolls down the window. He goes, Ferrari? I go, get the fuck in this car. I get in the car, and he's like, they don't know what to make of you. Have you lost your mind? He goes, it's bad enough for IAB is running around grabbing people for nonsense. He goes, you call them on yourself? So he goes, sit in this car. He goes, just sit in the car. I'm going to find out what's going on. He grabs his clip. I'll never forget. He grabs a clipboard and he just marches off into the building. And I'm praying. I'm not particularly religious, but I'm praying because I got 7-8 months in the NYPD. My dream is coming to an end. I'm going to get fired. The next thing I know, the captain comes walking out of the building with this guy who I'd never met before, and he's got him by the ear. The guy is screaming, and he brings him up to the car, and he goes, "Do you know him?" I said, "No." And he goes, "Why did you call? Why did you tell your girlfriend?" And he's shaking the guy, and he goes, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." He goes, "Now apologize to that cop." He goes, "If you ever, I'm going to put my foot so far up your ass," and kicks the guy in the ass and sends him on. I'm like, what just happened? And he goes, "Listen, kid," he says, you got to use common sense with this corruption stuff. He goes, and then he goes, "Let's find the moron that started all this." So it was an Italian cop that talked me into calling internal affairs on myself. And he's sitting there on the corner eating a cannoli. And the captain pulls up and he hits a sign. He goes, "Hey, Mussolini, get over here." And then he proceeds to abuse the other rookie cop.
Oh, it's hilarious. You could just picture this going on in your mind.
Well, it's like everything they told me in the police academy. You know what I mean? Like,
well, they're trying to scare you into being good. They're trying to force you to. They asked me to come to the DEA Academy to teach a class on integrity. How do you teach integrity?
Right, you either have it or you don't.
Exactly. And I never did it, but I appreciated the invitation. But
they pull that crap. So when you put in for organized crime, you go for your interview. And they did a more thorough background check. There's a story in one of my books. They do a more thorough background check to go into organized crime than they did to get hired.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I'm sitting in a room with lieutenants and sergeants and captains from different narcotics units across the city. And they're throwing questions at me. And I'll never forget one asked me, when people ask what your father does for a living, what do you tell them? He says, "I tell them that he's a butcher."
Mm-hmm.
And he brought up something about my father being a private investigator. And I was like, "That's not my dad." And he goes, "Oh, no, wait, I have it. My father and I have the same date of birth."
Really?
So he goes, is your father born on this day? And I go, "Yeah." He goes, got locked up a couple of times. I go, "My father? Never in a million years." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "Ask him over dinner. They really screw with you to get you going." So then after that interview, I had to sit in with a lieutenant from Internal Affairs, and I felt like Serpico. I'm sitting in a room, and he's like, "Sit down, relax," and, going on and on about integrity and,
Mm-hmm.
building integrity. And he goes, they're trying to recruit me to be a field associate. The NYPD, they grab guys in the academy. They usually grab kids in the academy that have no family on the job. They usually grab guys in the academy that are older. Not kids like 21. They grab guys that are like in their late 20s because they're waving that detective shield in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
And guys with no family on the job, or guys that are coming from out of state. And what they do is you're a CI. You're essentially a CI for the Internal Affairs Division. But they also do it, they can get you into narcotics quicker if you agree to become a field associate. And I'm sitting in the room with this lieutenant, and I said, "Lieutenant, look, I think narcotics is more difficult enough that I've got to wear two hats." I said, "I've got a spotless record. I think you see that I called Internal Affairs on myself some years ago," and he laughed. And I said, "If I see something, I'll say something, but I'm not doing this cloak and dagger crap."
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, no problem. So I go home that night. We're sitting around the dinner table, and I go, my mother's putting dinner out. And I go, "Dad, did you ever get," and like now I'm in my late 20s. I go, "Do you ever get arrested?" "Yeah, long time ago. I'm not proud of it." And then my mother starts going off. She's dropping plates. It's like dinner theater. It's 100 years ago. We don't like to talk about it, like screaming at me. But it was when he was a teenager. But they did a more thorough background check to get into organized crime. They go through your financials. They want to make sure you're not in debt,
Right.
Things like that.
Easy target. Yeah. So, what were some of did you end up in an organized crime? I know you worked with narcotics, right? What interested you about narcotics? What was the attraction?
It was the worst move I ever made in the police department. That in the DUI unit, the worst move. Well, I'll explain. So I'm 5 years on the job. I've already got a couple hundred arrests. I'm locking up the world. I'm in a plainclothes unit. I'm fast-tracked. I'm really doing well. My partner actually narrated a Netflix series. He's a homicide detective, Malcolm Ryman. He did the Times Square Killer Netflix series. So he and I are just cleaning up, making arrests. And at the time, Giuliani became mayor, and they were beefing up the narcotics teams. Each borough had maybe 20 detectives investigating narcotics, and then crack cocaine came, and they started beefing up each borough. So they just started picking up 100 guys at a time. They went from 30 guys to 250 guys, like almost overnight.
Wow.
And everybody got in my ear. You're going to put in for narcotics, right? You're going to put in for narcotics, right? I said, yeah, I guess I'll put in for narcotics. So I put in for narcotics. All my friends went to Bronx Narcotics, where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I didn't know anybody as a rookie cop, so I wound up in the 4-2, which was a hellhole. I didn't know anybody on the job. I went to Manhattan North Narcotics, and we turned out of an armory that was built around the 1800s. There was no air conditioning. You went into the bathroom and flushed the toilet. There were piss flies the size of bats that would buzz your head.
Whoa.
There was asbestos in the building. You couldn't drink the water. And the NYPD always does this. They screwed up the street crime unit, and for a while they screwed up the narcotics division. They look at street crime unit that used to lead the city with like 500 gun arrests a year with 30 guys. And they say, you know what? Why not put 100 guys in there and we'll come up with 5,000 gun arrests? Here's the thing. Now you're not getting the talent gets diluted, and you're not getting the same sharp guys. You get guys, some guy owns a landscaping company on Long Island and he mows a chief's lawn. Hey, boss, can you get me in a narcotic? This guy has no business chasing bad guys around. He went from an inside guy in a precinct, and now all of a sudden he's playing cowboys and Indians. That's how people get hurt.
Yeah.
And I just saw that. I didn't see corruption, but it was just too much cowboy shit and a lot. I just saw it as a recipe for disaster. And I mean, I had fun. I still have friends from the narcotics division for that to this day. But I went to my sergeant and I said, after about a year, I said, I'm thinking of getting out of here. And he goes, oh, what are you putting in for? I said, I just want to go back to patrol. And that's unheard of in the NYPD, and sits me down. First thing, is there police corruption? No. I just don't like working here. I don't like the commute. He goes, what if I try to get you into Bronx Narcotics? I go, that ship sailed. I says, I'm over this narcotics thing. Because in the narcotics division, it was buy and bust every day. The NYPD wants cases and they want numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't work a big case without the numbers dipping. As soon as the numbers dip, they want you to do buy and bust. Obviously, you guys target the larger traffickers. Do you know how like an NYPD narcotics module works? Okay, so a narcotics module, this is in my time. It could have changed.
Mm-hmm.
So a narcotics module, you'll have 5 detectives and a sergeant and a pool of undercovers. So one day, the sergeant's going to come up to me and you, and he's going to go, Vic, Steve, you're getting on today. And he's going to give us a $100 bill. You and I are going to go to a deli. We're going to break that $100 bill into smaller denominations, and then we're going to photocopy the money, pre-recorded by money, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to give that money to the undercovers, and we're going to pick whatever undercovers are working. We'll pick 2 or 3. Now you have sets. You have like a tax sheet with sets. So I was in Manhattan North, and I had the 2-3 team and the 3-4 team. So 2-3 was Spanish Harlem, was like shooting fish in the barrel. I could get out in uniform and buy crack. Washington Heights was all Dominicans. It was a little more difficult. The Dominicans sold powder to guys from New Jersey coming over the bridge. The Dominicans were very smart. You couldn't just roll up on them. Like a Spanish detective couldn't just walk up and buy coke without getting their balls busted, because they would ask in Spanish, where do you live? I'm from the Bronx. Why are you buying coke here? Go back to the Bronx. Black detectives, a lot of times they would try to rob them. So what we had to do was get white guys with Jersey plates and roll up. The Dominicans would always try to steer you into a hallway or in an apartment because they felt more comfortable. And a lot of times they'd run up to you in a car with a little credit card with coke on it. Sniff, sniff. Now, how aren't you going to sniff if you're buying coke?
Right.
A lot of times our undercovers were good. They're like, listen, I'm on my lunch hour. I got to go back to New Jersey. This is for the weekend. So the Dominicans were much more difficult to buy drugs from than Spanish Harlem, where 110 and Lex, for argument's sake, on 4 corners, you had 100 people either buying drugs, selling drugs. You had the dealers, you had the lookouts, you had the managers. You'd have an enforcer or 2 with a gun just in case someone tried to rip off the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would go out with an attack plan, and we would know 110 and Lex sells Hot Party and Hot City heroin. Up off, they would wear a Kel, which would transmit back to the car. So you and I would be in a car with a sergeant, and we would listen to the conversations. The undercover would step off and go to the location. The other two would ghost him and follow. And after a couple of seconds, you'd hear positive buy, 2 male Hispanics, red shirts. The drugs are in a paper bag under a license plate. The sergeant would say, "Field team, do you hear that description?" "Yep, move in." And we would pull up, and it was back then a corner like 110 and Lex had 100 people. So we're looking for 2 male Hispanics in red shirts, and here's a female in a green shirt throws a bag in the air with heroin. So we grab her. There goes the guy with the red shirt. Grab him. So say we grab 3-4 pieces, me and you, right? We take a manila envelope. I write subject number 1, red shirt, all his drugs, everything goes in the envelope, right? We cuff him up. We call for the P van, the prisoner van. A van pulls up. We take those 3 pieces, put them in a van, move to the next set. And once that van is filled, 10, 15 bodies, then you go to the precinct and then you mass produce. Then your field team is doing the strip search and going through their pockets. You're upstairs with what you recovered. The undercover's typing his buy report. It was mass arrest processing. And I said, this is a recipe for disaster. There's just too many moving parts with too many people that I don't really know all that well. Did I ever see anything go wrong? I didn't. But I just didn't want to put myself in that predicament.
It's redundant. It's the same thing over and over. The only experience I ever had with NYPD up there was working on the drug task force. And those guys were they were permanently assigned over to work with DEA, and Bureau was in there, and IRS guys and ATF. But good, good people, but nothing like the street level stuff you were doing. Hey players, this is the end of part 1. As you know, part 2 comes out tomorrow on a Tuesday. In the meantime, on social media, go and check us out on X at Game of Crimes, and on Facebook and Instagram at Game of Crimes Podcast. Also on Facebook, type in Game of Crimes fan page and join us for some more fun. Our website is gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including all our episodes, the book list, which contains the books written by our guests, Game of Crimes merchandise, and a lot more. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.